But first, why has the BBC had to spend almost £3.5 million on moving our radio programmes around the dial? Well, it's because the airwaves of Europe are becoming more and more crowded. At the moment, there are 1,450 transmitters around the continent, and even that means quite a bit of interference on our existing wave bands. But a new and rather controversial international agreement has given the go-ahead for another 1,250 transmitters. And at the same time, the BBC had decided to change its frequencies to keep clear of all the new stations and improve its own reception. Well, it's meant a mammoth operation for the BBC's engineers who've been installing and adjusting equipment all over the country. But of course, they've also landed you, the listeners, with quite a task as well. So you might like to know that apart from the help that we're trying to give you on programmes like this, scouts all over the country have volunteered to call in and tune a radio for anybody who still finds the changes rather confusing. Of course, all radio dials look different, and they should all be marked either in meters or in kilohertz, which in fact are just different ways of measuring the same thing. This radio here has 3 wave bands, but some don't have as many as that. The first one here is VHF or FM, and we're not going to have to bother about that because all stations on VHF remain exactly where they were. In most areas, in fact, VHF is the best channel for listening to radio on. It's up here on the medium wave where we start getting into the changes. Radio 1 has moved to a choice of wave bands. Here at 275 meters, that's 1089 kilohertz, or here at 285 meters, which is 1053 kilohertz. So, Christopher, see if now you can tune us in to wonderful Radio 1.
Andy Desmond, and that's called The Danger Zone. And I'd like to thank Andy for being in the studio and recording that music, especially for tonight's program. It's now 23 minutes after 6 on Radio 1, and he's arrived in the studio with me now. Hello, Glenn.
Hello, Kid. How wonderful to be on wonderful Radio 1. I've always
Welcome.
wondered what it was like. Do you have to work all this machinery?
It may look complicated, but it's really kid stuff.
What do you think the changes are going to do to your audience, the wavelength changes?
Well, make it bigger, I hope, because up to now, the reception for Radio 1, as you know, nationwide, has been a little bit patchy, but now it's all going to be crystal clear and people are actually going to understand what I'm saying. I'm a little worried about that. No, it's great.
Well, let me see your work. I've never seen anyone put on a record, and I've certainly never had a request played, so will you play
me a
one?
record,
Yes.
have you? What is it?
Show me how you do it.
Well, I put it on the turntable here. Crystal Gale.
Yes, would you like me to introduce
Radio
it?
1 Goes Country. Well, we'll have a go then.
It's
Glenn.
a lovely song.
Go.
It's called, And Don't It Make My Brown Eyes Blue, and it's by the wonderful Crystal Gale. Is that all right? Is that how you do it?
For television, great.
Thank you.
Right. Thanks. See you later, Glenn.
Yeah,
Right.
okay.
Just for you, Radio 1 Goes Country.
Well, next, Radio 2. And again, there are 2 positions to choose from on the medium wave. You can try 330 meters, which is 909 kilohertz there, or 433 meters, 693 kilohertz. And in some areas it'll be better on one of these frequencies and in other areas on the other. Just fiddle it about a bit. So let's try tuning in.
And lurking behind the glass there is John Dunn, who for once doesn't have the difficult task of luring the audience away from nationwide. Howard and Steve here are the technical operators. Howard looks after the quality and level of the sound coming out of your wireless, and Steve looks after all the tapes, making sure that you don't get a boring old lecture when you should be getting Frank Sinatra. And Sandra Black is the producer today. She's the one who actually chooses the items and makes sure that everything runs smoothly. But there's no doubt that the man in the hot seat is the man with the melting voice, John Dunn.
Ah, that's a lovely record. Smashing, isn't it? Daylight Katie, sung there by Gordon Lightfoot. Hello, television. Good evening, nationwide.
Thank you, John Dunn. Now we're going to raise the tone a bit, you might say, and tune in to Radio 3. And you can find that on 247 meters. There it is. That's 1,215 kilohertz. Only one choice on medium wave, though, of course, the old VHF channel is still in operation. And if we tune in, Christopher, we should find Patricia Hughes with the record programme Homeward Bound.
And, of course, Patricia doesn't spend all her time cooped up here in a Radio 3 studio. No, she, in fact, we went with her once to a live concert recently at a venue well known to Radio 3 listeners, and that's St John's Smith Square.
And so to the main Radio 4 UK service, which has moved from the medium wave to the long wave. And you can find it here on 1500 meters, 200 kilohertz, though you can still get it on medium wave radios in a few areas.
Well, we're coming up now to the moment when, for the first time in broadcasting history, BBC One nationwide links up with all 4 radio networks. We hope that this will help you to identify who's who on the frequencies and, more importantly, who's where. If you look at those dials behind me, you'll see that they're recording the vocal patterns of all the radio networks and the television channel. And in a few seconds, you'll see a unique sight when they, all of them, point in exactly the same direction. And now we welcome radio listeners from all 4 radio networks to Nationwide on BBC One. We're getting together for the first time ever in order to help you identify all the BBC radio stations and their frequencies. So here they are from 1 to 4.
Hi, this is Kid Jensen on Radio 1, now broadcasting on 275 and 285 meters. That's 1089 and 1053 kilohertz in the medium wave.
Hello, John Dunn here on behalf of all of us on Radio 2. We broadcast now on 433 and 330 meters medium wave, 693 and 909 kilohertz.
Hello, this is Patricia Hughes on Radio 3, broadcasting on 247 meters, that's 1215 kilohertz on the medium wave.
Hello, this is Moira Stewart on Radio 4. We now broadcast on 1500 meters, 200 kilohertz on the long wave and on VHF FM in England.
And this is Glyn Worsnip on Nationwide, wishing all the radio networks well.